Hi everyone, I hope you all are doing good. In my today's session, I'm going to explain about Microsoft Entra ID security groups and access management. Basically, it's securing your applications or resources access in a better way on Microsoft Azure. Okay, so let's start with it. Okay, Microsoft Entra ID provides several ways to manage access to resources, applications, and tasks. With Microsoft Entra groups, you can grant access and permissions to a group of users instead of assigning for each individual user. Limiting access to Microsoft Entra resources to only those users who need access is one of the core security principles of Zero Trust. Okay, we should provide access to only those users who needs access to it, and they have a legitimate and genuine reason to access it. Otherwise, we should not. This video provides an overview of how groups and access rights can be used together to make managing your Microsoft Entra users easier while also applying security's best principles or practices. Microsoft Entra ID lets you use groups to manage access to applications, data, resources. Okay, so the following are the resources which can be used. Okay, so part of the Microsoft Entra organization, such as permissions to manage objects through roles in Microsoft Entra ID, external to organization such as software as a service apps. So basically some external software component is basically available as software as a service for us, so basically we can also manage it access. Okay, using this particular security groups or user groups. Azure services, okay, a very typical example or most commonly seen example, Azure services, for which we basically perform access management or access rights management. SharePoint sites, on-premises resources. Some groups can't be managed in Azure portal. The above are the ones which were basically managed using Azure portal. Okay, and there are some groups which can't be managed in Azure portal. Our groups synced from an on-premise active directory can be managed only in on-premises active directory only. Do remember, there are some companies who are not on Azure cloud. Their active directory completely stays on their internal organization infrastructure itself. Okay, so groups synced from an on-premises active directory can be managed only in that on-premise active directory only. You can't manage it from Microsoft Azure portal. Distribution lists and mail enabled security groups are managed only in Exchange Admin Center or Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You must sign in to Exchange Admin Center or Microsoft 365 Admin Center to manage these groups. Okay, do remember this point. Okay, now we were speaking about the security groups. So what are the various security groups or group types provided by Microsoft Entra ID? There are basically two types of groups, guys. One is security group and another one is Microsoft 365 groups. Okay, so security. The security group is basically the most important one for our discussion. Okay, so the security group used to manage user and computer access to shared resources. For example, you can create a security group so that all group members have the same set of security permissions. Member of a security group can include users, devices, service principals, and other groups, also known as nested groups, which define access policy and permissions. Owner of a security group can include users and service principals. Okay, so basically security group of type or group of type security is used to manage user and computer access to shared resources. Okay, so one good example I would like to take over here, in most of the modern day applications which are being built, I have seen a practice where uh, the developers usually end up in creating user access management completely on the application side itself. Guys, this is not at all required. Okay, it's not about your application ultimately going to decide who should need access to it or not, but the best practice is you should handle this kind of accesses using built-in inbuilt supports provided Microsoft Entra ID. Okay, So instead of you writing a custom logic to create this kind of security groups and doing user management from your half, what you can do is basically make use of Microsoft Entra security group. Okay, and then what are you going to do is whoever needs the access or whatever user needs the access, basically you can simply take that user and add that user to your created security group on Azure portal. Okay, this is the best, or I would say recommended approach to streamline access management to your resources. Okay, so what I have seen is usually we do application development. Okay, and what we do is instead of doing a group assignment to our app registrations, I'm explaining in terms of Microsoft Cloud apps now. Okay, or the applications we build on Microsoft Cloud. So what we do is basically we develop our applications and then we only handle the user management, and whenever a new user has to be onboarded, what we do is we simply keep on adding that user to that particular application. Okay, so instead of doing that, we can make use of this kind of security group. Okay, and whenever a group of users or a user needs access to your application, okay, just add that user to your security group, and security group contains what all permissions this group of users required in order to access your applications. Okay, so advantage of this kind of approach is that, okay, until and unless your user is not part of this security group, trust me, he won't be able to access your application. Straight away they will get 403 forbidden. Okay, so until and unless you won't explicitly add them to security group, access is completely denied. Okay, so this way you are going to double sure that there are no loopholes in your access management. One of the bad practice which I have seen is people basically develop their applications on cloud, and what they do is instead of creating these kind of security groups, they simply keep on adding users to their applications manually. Okay, using the custom logic. You can completely avoid that. Just create a security group, add that user to that group and provide necessary permissions to that group, and assign that group to your application or app registration. That is more than enough, guys. You are streamlined with the access management. Okay, second one is Microsoft 365 provides collaboration opportunities by giving group members access to a shared mailbox, calendar files, SharePoint sites, and more. This option also lets you give people outside of an organization access to the group. Members of a Microsoft 365 group can only include users. Okay, owners of a Microsoft 365 group can include users and service principals. Okay, so this is the one constraint you should always remember. Now, once you have created a group, okay, how will the membership basically works? Okay, so there are basically four types of, yeah, there are basically three types of memberships which we can follow. Assigned, let you add specific user as member of a group and have unique permissions. Okay, so in case of assigned approach, you can directly pick your user, okay, and basically add them as member of your group. Okay, dynamic user lets you use dynamic membership rules to automatically add and remove members. If a member's attribute change, the system looks at your dynamic group rules for the directory to see whether the member meets the rule requirements or no longer meets the rule requirement. Basically setting up a condition, I would say. Okay, so whatever attributes your user has on Microsoft Entra ID, if those attributes changes, whenever those attribute changes, this rule will decide whether this user can be added to the group or removed from the group. Dynamic device lets you use dynamic group rules to automatically add or remove devices. Okay, here you deal with the devices. If a device's attribute change, the system looks at your dynamic group rules for the directory to see whether the device meets the rule requirements or no longer meets the rules requirements. Okay, yeah, so what to know before adding access rights to a group? After creating a Microsoft Entra group, you need to grant it the appropriate access. Each application, resource, and the service that requires access permission needs to be managed separately because the permission for one might not be same as another. Grant access using the principle of least privilege to help reduce the risk of attack or a security breach. Okay, so based on your requirements you are going to create various security groups. Okay, and always remember, one security group doesn't address all your access management requirements. Okay, you have to create separate set of security groups in order to streamline the access control to your resources or applications. Okay, so that's what you have to be always aware of during your designs or the security design, I would say. So how access management in Microsoft Entra ID works, I would like to take a simple example here. Okay, for example, we have an software as a service component, say Salesforce. Okay, so what are the various ways of assignments we can do here? Okay, so first of all, we can add a user Mary from sales department directly to have access to this software as a service component. Second, we will create a security group called Project Icarus, and we can add users to this group in order to have a group based access. This is what the more preferred approach in for the cloud based applications access management. And then there's external source based assignment where the on-premises Active Directory. Basically, the team members are coming from, or the group itself is coming from the on-premises Active Directory, and using Entra Connect, we have access to that group, and that group will be provided access to this software as a service component. Okay, so here it's coming from the external source, and this on-premises Active Directory decides whom should it add to this group and whom should not. Then comes the rule based assignment or dynamic group assignment, I would say. Okay, based on these users attributes Jane and Bob, whenever their attributes changes, the rules will fire and rules will decide whether they can be added to project Daedalus or not. Okay, in order to have access to this application. Okay, so that's what I explained over here now. Okay, so assigning access rights, that's what I explained how it basically works out here. Okay, so after creating a group you need to decide how to assign access rights. Okay, and these are the ways to assign rights to determine the best practices for our scenario, which I already explained. As I said, direct assignment, the resource owner directly assigns the user to the resource. Group assignment, okay, the direct assignment is one, which I explained over here. Group assignment is one, which is happening here, a group based, a more preferred approach for application accesses. Okay, rule based assignment, okay, this is the one which you can use based on your rule, your users attributes changes, the rules will fire and the rules will decide in order to add this particular user to this security group and then have access to this resource. External authority assignment, access comes from an external source such as an on-premises Active Directory or SaaS app. In this situation, the resource owner assigns a group to provide access to the resource, and then the external source manages the group members, as I already explained. Okay, yeah, so that's what it's all about, the group management here, guys. Pretty straightforward. Okay, now who can create the group, who can decide who is going to be the group owner of that? Guys, there are multiple approaches. First of all, okay, here the resource owner, basically Charlie, of this particular resource can create a group like project Icarus. Okay, and then assign this particular group to this particular resource. So creation of the group happens by Charlie, and then project Icarus assignment to this particular Salesforce resource is done by him on Azure portal. Okay, Okay, one way. Then comes second approach. Okay, Charlie decides to assign a group owner now. Okay, what he can do is basically for this particular group, he may decide to create a group owner, and this group owner takes the responsibility of assigning users to the group, like Paul and John. Okay, so your assignment happens through the group owner, and then these users will become part of this particular security group, and again they will have the access to this particular resource. Okay. Okay, so I have covered most of the parts, important points associated with these security groups and access management. Okay, guys. So for enterprise grade software application, what I would suggest is, okay, the overall conclusion which I'm going to give, or I would suggest, is always ensure access to your resources or your applications which you have built using the security groups. Okay, first of all, you are ensuring double checks in order to have access to your application. And how that happens? Okay, until and unless a user, even if he is part of your organization, okay, by default every user of your organization basically uh, have the access or have the permission to authenticate themselves using the Entra ID. Okay, if it is a public facing application or it's an internal application, I'm speaking only to the internal employees of your organization or internal members of a Entra ID group or Entra ID. Okay, so first of all, if user if the user is not part of your security group, he won't access your application or resource. Okay, this way you are eliminating a threat of unauthorized access to your applications. Okay, so if a user needs access to your application, he has to raise a ticket to your, say, information security team that we need access for this particular resources or application, please approve this. Then it goes to your ITS or to your team itself. You will review the access request. Okay, based on the need, you will either approve or reject that request, and then you decide to add the user to this particular group or not. Okay, first point. Okay, then after providing access to this particular security group, then you can handle any kind of user management, further accesses from your application level. Okay, this basically acts as a first gateway. Okay, or security gateway, which basically prevents the users illegal access to your application or resources. If they are not part of the security group, just don't allow them to access your application. That's it, as simple as it is. Okay, if you want, you can use a dynamic rule based accesses, but this is the bare minimum thing you can implement for your application's security. Okay, so that's what I wanted to explain. I hope you people are aware of Microsoft security groups. Okay, and the assignments and all. So instead of doing a direct assignment, you can basically go with this particular approach. Okay, and advantage of having this kind of security group is that if you have, say, 20 number of users, and all those 20 users need same level of permissions, access rights. Okay, then in that case it's a good approach to create a group and provide that group those permissions, okay, and access levels, and just add users to that group, and rest they will get access to your underlying resources. No need to go to the resource and keep on adding resources one by one. Let's avoid that. Instead of that, we can make use of this. Okay, the better approach is, where if you are developing an application on Microsoft Azure, let's say you are developing some application over here, you have developed it. In that case, what you are going to do is your application must be having an app registration, right? Because on Azure, each and every application must have an app registration. So what are you going to do is you are going to create a security group and assign that security group, in this example project iCares, assign that security group to your app registration. If you take this step, no need to deal with the user access to your app registration one by one. Okay, so simply add your users to security group and that's it. The users have access to your application, and it also avoids any kind of loopholes in associated with your security access or your application access in your organization. Okay, well, I hope that's all from this session. Thank you for listening, and yeah, have a nice day. Thank you.